Welcome to the What Makes a Great Trial Judge podcast, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. We've paired up with Lisa Blue, a practicing psychologist of 46 years and trial attorney of 44 years, to discuss some of the ways trial judges, especially those dealing with trauma-intensive cases, can improve their techniques and social practices, making the litigation experience more meaningful for jurors and litigants alike. So, how do you tell the difference between a great trial judge and one who needs to work on their social intelligence skills? Let's find out. We'll be interviewing some of the greatest trial judges around who offer tips for improvement and share their secrets. And with that, here's your host, Lisa Blue.
Good morning, Judge Furgeson. How are you?
Good morning, Lisa Blue. I'm great and so wonderful to be with you today.
Well, thank you for doing this podcast called What Makes a Great Trial Judge? And I don't know anybody else who is better to talk about what makes a great trial judge than you. So, Judge Furgeson, let's get started a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where were you born? Just about your background before you became a judge.
I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, the hub city. You know, it was a very patriotic place. Some people say big part of the Bible Belt. I was raised Methodist. So I had sort of a open tradition. The Methodist, some people said the Methodists believe everything or nothing, but I really enjoyed, the church, and we were at the church whenever it opened. So the Methodist church had a big influence on me. I was the oldest of four. I was born just before World War II, and then my dad went to the Army and then came back, and then my brother and sister were born after the war. For a while there, I was an only child. While my dad was in World War II, my mother worked, and my aunts helped rear me, which I think probably was a big influence, having all those aunts. My father had 8 sisters, so they would come in and out helping me. Wanted to be a basketball player and played in high school and then walked on at Texas Tech, played 2 years, but then the coach said he thought I'd reached my maximum potential and he had some other young men coming on, so I needed to do something else. So then I got involved in school politics, was president of the student government, also in ROTC. So I had a commission when I graduated from Tech. I deferred the commission to go to law school. I went to law school at University of Texas. Tech didn't even have a law school when I graduated from college. After I graduated from law school, I had a 2-year commitment in the Army, not in the JAG Corps, but in what's called the Judge Advocates Corps, which is the administrative and personnel branch of the Army. Spent a year in Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which is the home of the ordnance, and then a year in the Republic of South Vietnam. I always tell people I was not carrying a rifle, I was carrying a typewriter. But had an amazing experience and was around people that were carrying rifles and doing really brave things.
Why were you in Vietnam for your JAG Corps?
It was the adjutant. It's the adjutant, the AG Corps, the Adjutant General Corps, which is administrative and personnel, instead of the JAG Corps, which would have been legal. But if I'd gone to JAG, I'd had to make a 4-year commitment, and I only wanted to make a 2-year commitment. So after Vietnam, I didn't have a job. And so in those days, you sent telegrams. So I sent a telegram to the people at the University of Texas saying, I'm looking for a job. You know anybody that needs somebody to go to work? And they said, well, the federal judge in Lubbock is looking for a law clerk. So I sent him a telegram, and he sent me a telegram back and said, you're hired. So he didn't interview me. He didn't look at my resume. He just said, "You're hired," which was a great thing for me because I spent a year watching Halbert Woodward try cases. And that had an enormous impact on me to watch him as he really tried to be fair and make decisions based upon the facts of the law. And I just thought he was remarkable. And that year had a big impact.
What did you like most about him? What really touched you?
I think what I like several things about him. I like the fact that he liked lawyers. I like the fact that he had been a practicing lawyer for a long time before he went on the bench. And so he had a great deal of experience in many different areas. He practiced in Brownwood, which was a small community, I guess, in Central Texas, and did everything. He wrote wills, wrote contracts, tried lawsuits, was on the bank board. He was just a really interesting man. He had been chair of the Texas Highway Commission, and so he had some involvement in state government. I appreciated the breadth of his experience. I appreciated that he wanted to be fair and resolve every case on the facts of the law, that he set aside all sorts of views about politics and religion and everything else just to make a fair decision. And that really impacted me a great deal. So it was a very meaningful year.
And that was Waco or Lubbock?
Lubbock.
Oh, that was Lubbock. Okay.
Right. And
okay,
then
here, yes.
Yes. And then so that was 1969, 1970. And then I interviewed since I'd been out of law school now 3 years, I had a lot of friends who were in the practice. So I interviewed with various firms where I had law school friends and ended up going to the Kemp Smith firm in El Paso. I wanted to go to El Paso because it just seemed like a really open community. I wanted a diverse community, and of course, it's very diverse. And so I practiced law for 24 years in El Paso, trying cases not only in El Paso but all over West Texas. I tried a lot of cases in Midland and Pecos. I even tried a case in Lubbock, and so I.
What kind of cases did you try?
They were. I started out trying intersection collisions and workers' comp cases. I was on
plaintiff or defendant?
For the defendant. My firm had a big stable of insurance clients, and in those days, I tried more than a couple of workers' comp cases. The worst a defendant can do in a workers' comp case is get a finding of total and permanent. And one week I got a finding against me of total and permanent twice in two different cases. So I learned how to lose cases and keep going. And you have to learn that juries. In the end, I think juries get the case right. And I tried intersection collision cases, and then I kind of graduated to trying commercial cases. Had a antitrust case that went for 4 weeks in Judge Wynn's court in federal court in El Paso, and that was an interesting turning point for me. The case I won the case. We won the case at the trial court level, and then went it on appeal. And so
that was a defense case?
A defense case.
Okay.
But later I tried a couple of plaintiffs' cases and got one of the biggest plaintiffs' verdicts in El Paso and was able to hold on to that case on appeal. So and then the FDIC closed all those banks in Midland, and
And what year are we up to?
we're up to about 19 early 80s, and where and the FDIC hired our firm. So I kind of lived out of a suitcase for 4 or 5 years, trying cases in front of Judge Bunton in Midland, who was a excellent trial judge, but he killed you on discovery because he only gave you 90 days to get a case ready. So you learn how to adapt when you have a new judge with a different view. And then, one of the difficult things that happened to our firm, it just at the beginning of the 1990s, the district attorney decided that our firm, our two senior partners, the electric company, Pete Marwick, that everybody had conspired to steal money from annuity holders. And so our firm, along with a whole bunch of other people, and our two senior partners, was indicted in state court.
Gosh.
They also indicted the FDIC, by the way, who had been a part of a closing of a savings loan. And the case got transferred to federal court. Judge Bunton tried that case for 2 weeks, and everybody was acquitted. But it was a real experience to be working in a firm for about 16 months while the firm itself is under indictment. It was an interesting experience, one that I wouldn't want to ever do again. And then about that time, Bill Clinton was elected president, and I'd been a long-time Democrat supporting Democratic candidates, and supported Bill Clinton. And I didn't think he probably had a ghost of a chance, and he won. And he won at the end of 92, and then in 93 he nominated me to be on the bench, and then in 94 I was confirmed and took the bench in March.
So I know you're a mediator now, correct?
Correct.
How long were you a federal judge, a practicing federal judge?
19 years.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And then, as you know, Lisa, I retired to become the dean of UNT, and I did that for 5 years, and then retired, and now I'm mediating. You're exactly right.
That's great. Okay, well, let's go back to your 19 years. That's a lot of experience to help judges who'd like to learn from you. So tell me, first of all, as far as the division between criminal and civil cases, how would you divide your docket in those 19 years?
Well, at the beginning, I had a year in El Paso, and then I was moved to Midland, Odessa, and Pecos, and had 8 years there. So my first 9 years, I was basically on the border. Of course, El Paso is right on the border. Pecos covers 400 miles of border with Mexico. And so my docket was really a very heavy criminal docket. I probably, I remember when I started in Midland and Pecos had about 20 criminal cases the year before I started, and then they doubled or tripled the size of the Border Patrol. They had a big, what they called a Southwest Initiative from the executive office, and so they really put a lot of law enforcement resources on the border. And all at once, 2 or 3 years later in Pecos, it went from 20 criminal cases to almost 300 criminal cases. And so I was spending normally at least a week and maybe 2 weeks out of the month in Pecos, trying criminal cases. And this is sort of the Trans-Pecos area of Texas. And the tradition out there was to really try criminal cases. So I often tried 5 or 6 cases over 2 weeks of criminal cases. And the criminal cases wouldn't be long cases because they would involve somebody driving up to a checkpoint, the Border Patrol officer or the dog indicating some problem with the cargo in the vehicle, putting them over into the secondary lane, finding drugs. And so the testimony would come from the Border Patrol officer and the chemist who tested the drugs, and then maybe the defendant would testify. So the cases often took about a day to try, but often I would just stack them up one after another. Also,
what was the most meaningful thing you learned from that experience?
That it can be a challenge to make sure that due process works when you have an overwhelming docket, because I would end up sometimes sentencing 50 or 60 people over a couple of days period and trying to make sure that I gave them all an appropriate attention and considered their case individually. It can be a real challenge. And I really worried a lot about that, that I was making appropriate sentencing decisions, given the size of the docket. So that it just kept telling me that I just needed to work doubly hard to make certain that everybody received fair consideration in the sentencing area. So, at any rate, that was one of the things that worried me during that period of time.
Once you were able to make a decision, were you the type of person that would go back and wonder if you'd done the right thing, or were you able to really move on and just let whatever go, whatever happened, let it go and just move on to the next case?
In most instances, I was able to let it go. Okay. Although there were times when I really, the cases stuck with me, and they kept kind of coming back and coming back and coming back. And so, when you're on the border, you see, you see young people young people who are poor and who decide that they'll drive a truck from Ojinaga to Odessa for $400, and that truck has a ton of drugs in it, and all at once they're stopped at a checkpoint, and they're looking at at least 10 years in prison. Some of those young people weren't citizens, and so but had spent their whole lives in the U.S., and so they really had no connection to Mexico. But as soon as they got out of prison, they were deported into Mexico, where they had no contacts at all. And so, the pervasiveness of the drug culture really did bother me. And of course, you're a judge. You're not. You have to just take the cases as they come. But you did. I really did worry that our kind of insatiable desire for drugs was really causing an enormous amount of tragedy in so many lives. And that bothered me a lot. And yet, it's not my job is to solve every problem in the world. So I had to do what I had to do with the assignments I had, and then move on.
Okay, so now that's in the border towns. How'd you get to Dallas?
Well, through San Antonio. I had always been a trial lawyer that practiced in the civil justice system. And I knew that if I stayed in Midland, I would probably never get much of an opportunity to try civil cases. And so I asked if I could move to San Antonio. Rob Janelle from San Angelo had just been appointed to the bench. And so the most likely place for Rob to come was Midland, closest to San Angelo. And that would free me to go to San Antonio, where I would have a more balanced docket and deal with more civil cases. So I asked to move. I did move and spent 7 years in San Antonio.
And are we in the 90s now?
Yeah, well, I moved to San Antonio in 2002.
Okay.
And spent till 2009. Then I took senior status and moved to Dallas, and was on the Dallas bench until from 2009 to 2013, and then of course retired to the law school. So and from while I was in San Antonio and Dallas, my opportunities really opened up to try civil cases, which I enjoyed a lot. I learned a lot from the criminal cases. In many ways, it's where the rubber meets the road, and where our Constitution really comes into play. But I spent a lifetime trying civil cases, and so I wanted a balance, and I received a balance.
Let's talk about now the topic that you're here to talk about, which is, what do you think, from all that criminal and civil experience, what do you think, if you're talking to a room of judges, makes a really great trial judge?
To me, it's the ability to set everything else aside and decide the case on the facts and the law. To set your political viewpoints aside, set your religious viewpoints aside, set the influences of your friends and family aside, and decide the case based upon the facts and the law as fairly as you can. I'm a big, giant believer in juries. I saw hundreds of juries while I was a judge, and before that, I tried 40 or 50 jury trials in my 24 years in the practice. And I really just have an enormous respect for juries. It's the thing that makes our judicial system democratic, in a small d democratic, where our people come in and make decisions. It's the only place in our government, if you think about it, where our people decide what's going to happen. I mean, directly decide what's going to happen, not through a vote or some other way, but through a direct decision-making process. And so my view with juries was to give them every chance to make their decision based upon the facts and the law as I gave it to them. I always thought it was very important to treat the lawyers respectfully, and to make sure that the jury never saw me as being biased or prejudiced as to one party or the other, as to one group of lawyers as the other. And so I always focused on being respectful to lawyers, to give them an opportunity to try their case. I tried cases, Lisa, for 24 years, and that pretty much is, I guess, had been beaten out of me. So I didn't want to try cases anymore. I wanted to give the lawyers the chance to try their own case as they saw fit. So, being respectful to the lawyers, being respectful to the law and to the facts, and giving a jury the case in an unbiased way, those were very important things to me.
Was there anything, because you've had so many jury trials as a federal judge, is there anything that you would say to the jurors that you think made them feel like the process was very important, what they were doing really mattered?
Thank you for that question, because there's something that I had a speech when we brought the jury in at the very beginning. And the speech actually went on for about 10 or 12 minutes. And in that speech, I told the jury that I knew how inconvenient it was to be there. I knew that they were being taken away from their work and their families and from everything else to come into court. And that, that was in many ways a stressful thing for them. But I told them, in America, we do justice with juries, and justice is so important to our society. And the way we get it right is through the jury system. And then I went over some history with them, how it came to be that, we had our Constitution, how important the Bill of Rights were, the first 10 amendments, and how crucial juries were within the framework of the first 10 amendments, with the Sixth Amendment giving our people the right to trial by jury in criminal cases, and the Seventh Amendment giving our people the right to trial by jury in civil cases. And I said the center of the Bill of Rights, the center of our freedoms, is the jury system. And so what you're here to do is incredibly important. And I know it's a sacrifice in so many different ways, but your being here, your sacrifice is making justice work in America. And there's, in my opinion, almost nothing more important than making sure that we are a fair and just society. And that normally seemed to work and to give them an understanding of how important their duties would be if they were selected on the jury.
That's a great story and great advice. But as we're now closing it down, this part of the podcast, do you have any story after all those decades that you've been trying cases as a federal judge that really sticks in your mind, that just made you realize how important it was to how you treated people or what you said, or something a story that you think is a great teaching example for other judges?
I guess the thing that sticks out to me during my 19 years is not maybe one story, but just a story of the juries and the people that populated my juries. I remember, you think of Midland, Odessa out in the Permian Basin, you think of it as a very conservative place. I remember one time I had a jury impaneled the middle of December to try a case where 5 men said they had been fired because of age discrimination. And I had the president of the bank and the president of a auto dealership. So, you were thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be a very conservative jury, and those 5 men may not have much of a shot at it. The jury never blinked. They came back in and found for all 5 men, they found that the employer had been unfair in the way it had treated those men. And then at the end, the jury asked me to come in, and they said, we want you to know that we're your Christmas jury, because I think they deliberated till the 23rd or so. But they had such a good spirit in doing their duty. And that is what always struck me, is that once the jury got in the box, as we say, they really got engaged and they took their work with great seriousness. The other thing I want to say, one of the problems that I see in federal court is that, we've got to write about everything we do. We have to sometimes write, we get all these motions for summary judgment, all these motions to dismiss. And so we're spending all our time on the front end dealing with all of this. And I think sometimes we forget that, we're trial judges. Instead of being back in our chambers working on these motions, we ought to deal as fairly and well as we can with those motions. But we ought to remember we need to be in the courtroom, and we need to have juries deciding cases. In federal court now, when I worked for Judge Woodward, I think he tried in 1 year over 30 jury trials. I mean, that was the order of the day. You just next week is a jury trial, next week is a jury trial, and so forth and so on. When I finished, federal judges are trying 6 or 7 jury trials in the year. Now, some of them are more complex and so forth, I understand. But we have to be careful about how we look at motion to dismiss, especially motion to dismiss at the beginning of the case before any factual development, and thinking that we're going to resolve that case at the very beginning without giving anybody a chance to figure out maybe the details of the facts. And my great teacher, Charles Wright at the UT Law School, always said, just because it appears that a summary judgment could be granted doesn't mean you must grant a summary judgment if you feel like this is a matter that needs to be reviewed by a jury. So, at any rate, I'm worried about these trend lines where we find ourselves back in our chambers, writing opinions and not being on the bench hearing lawyers argue cases.
Great advice.
So that I diverted from your question, Lisa, but I think the thing that comes across to me as my experience as a federal judge is how the juries worked and how conscientious they were, and how so many times, 99 times out of 100, they got it just right.
Right. I'm dying to know, in those 19 years, what was your pet peeve, either with jurors or lawyers or just generally? Did you have any that stand out?
A great question. I was a trial lawyer for 24 years, and that was really heavy lifting. I mean, fighting with lawyers, trying to make docket calls all over West Texas, getting clients to understand what the problems were with the case, getting witnesses up. I mean, it was the hardest thing I think I ever did, is just be a trial lawyer. It's so hard to be a trial lawyer.
Right. And
so when I got on the bench and I could control my schedule, and I had much more control over my life, because a trial lawyer just doesn't have control over her life. I mean, you're at the whim of so many different things. So, and to be able to think about cases and try to get them just right, not just be an advocate. I was so grateful to have that job, Lisa, that I think every day I came to work thinking how lucky I was, and understanding how hard the lawyers that were appearing before me, how hard they were working, how difficult their jobs were. I I just had such an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I got a chance to do the job that I really, I just said, I just don't have anything to complain about. I'm in the middle of this really wonderful justice system, trying to make it work fairly. And what a great opportunity. And I know that may sound almost like a Pollyanna answer, but after you spend 24 years trying lawsuits, to get to be a judge is like, just like a great gift. And I just wanted to do my best to do it right every day, and to let, if there was some glitch somewhere, to let it roll off my back. So that was kind of the way I approached things.
So in closing, let's say you're in a room full of judges. Maybe some are new, maybe some have had a couple of years experience, maybe more. What would your general advice be to this room of judges?
Don't be agenda driven. Don't come into court with the view that you're going to kind of honor a political viewpoint or religious viewpoint, or that your decision will be guided by what your friends and family will think. That's just, put that aside. Work to decide the cases on the facts and the law, fairly judged, and really understand that, as I tell juries, the center of our justice system is the jury trial, and work to make sure that juries come into court and are treated with honor, and that they're given every opportunity to make their decision based upon a fair view of the facts and the law as you give it to them. But one of the things I want to tell them is, don't be agenda driven. That's not our job to promote some political view or religious view, or some view that our family has or whatever. The law is too important and justice is too important for that. Center on the facts and the law and the jury, and just do it to the best of your ability.
Great advice. Thank you so much. I know you have been a mentor to so many. I know that personally because you're one of my mentors. And I just love your attitude. You always had a smile, whether you're mediating in court, and it was so obvious to every person in front of you how much you loved your job. So thank you for spending time with me.
Well, Lisa, thanks for letting me do this. It was fun to think back about these issues. I think what you're doing is important. I appreciate all your lovely compliments. I just tried to do the best I could. There were some days where I felt like I didn't do as well as I should. And so, I was glad I had the next day to do better. So at any rate, thank you for letting me do this, and thank you for being so kind to me.
Thank you. Have a great day, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
That concludes this episode of What Makes a Great Trial Judge, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. We hope you'll take some of these trial tips and incorporate them in your everyday practice to improve the litigation process for everyone involved. Please consider subscribing to this podcast and take some time to explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer. Your feedback and ideas are always welcome. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.